Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The map in front of them was riddled with red marks. Satellite photos laid out like puzzle pieces. Tactical teams pointed, debated, sketched escape routes. But Ava Anderson, she stood at the back, arms folded, silent, eyes sharp, uninvited. No one noticed the quiet Norwegian with the regulation bun and pale blue eyes. Not when Staff Sergeant Benedetti leaned over the table and declared confidently, "We'll take the northern approach. Standard recon flank formation establish." Presence. Ava's gaze flicked to the map. The route was exposed open fields, no cover. She saw it instantly, and so would the enemy. She stepped forward, but before she could speak, Benedetti's glance stopped her cold. "Communications personnel don't need to examine tactical intelligence," he said with a dismissive smile. Chuckles followed from the combat guys. Clustered around the map, she stepped back again. They had no idea who she was or what she saw. What none of them knew, what even her direct superior didn't know, was that Ava had once tracked enemy units through 200 kilometers of Arctic wilderness without being detected once. She was the youngest recon champion in Norwegian military history. Now she fixed radios for NATO, or so they thought. She didn't argue. Not here. Not anymore. She knew how this place worked. Hierarchy, tradition, pride, all. Barriers wrapped in camouflage. You were either combat or support. You either had stripes on your sleeves, or you stayed out of the way. So Ava fixed the radio. She ran frequency tests, calibrated antennas. She kept to herself in the mess hall, avoided the swaggering soldiers, sat with the other quiet types, the medics, the engineers, the admin clerks. She made no enemies. She made no waves. But at night, she mapped enemy movements in her bunk, and what she saw scared her. The hills around Camp Vigilant were beautiful in the daylight, green, endless, peaceful. But Ava had been watching patterns, watching long enough to know beauty was a mask. She tracked radio frequencies others ignored, interference. Others dismissed static that didn't belong. Wildlife behaving strangely, nesting birds that were covering hidden signal arrays, equipment too advanced to belong to local rebels. Tactical patterns that looked too clean. This wasn't disorganized harassment. This was preparation. But when she tried to speak, she was told, again, to focus on her radios. The problem wasn't her evidence. The problem was her badge, communications specialist. Third class. That was the problem. Not her eyes, not her mind, not her training, at least. Not yet. The day it started, the sky was cloudless. Radios were clean. Standard maintenance had been completed. The morning briefing was routine, almost boring. Then everything unraveled. It started with a malfunction, a dead zone in the RADIO network. A glitch, someone said, a weather issue, someone else said. Ava said nothing. Instead, she ran her own diagnostics, quietly, carefully. The answer chilled her. The interference wasn't random, it was deliberate. Someone, something, was using natural disruptions to camouflage electronic surveillance, exploiting the birds that arraigned the signal bounce. She had seen this before. Arctic warfare pattern recognition, layered jamming. It was signature work, not of rebels, but of trained military operatives, professionals. She brought her findings to Sergeant Erickson. He scanned her report. "Birds," he said. "No, the birds are the cover. Someone is listening, using them." He looked up, uncomfortable. "Ava, we're technicians, not intelligence. This is above our clearance. Let the analysts handle it. But they won't see it, and that's not your call." That night, Ava didn't sleep. Instead, she checked her private surveillance logs, reran frequency patterns, compared encrypted comms, and finally, she started mapping enemy movements, synchronized signals, perimeter scans. The base was being watched, every inch of it. The next week brought confirmation, intercepted chatter on unusual frequencies, infrared blips outside the observation range, cameras catching shadows that didn't match known patrol routes. She compiled a report, dozens of pages, diagrams, maps, intercepts. She handed it in. It was returned unread, stamped, Out of scope, not authorized. And so Ava did what she always did. She watched, she listened, she waited. Not for permission, for inevitability. She heard them before anyone else. 6:02 a.m. A static crackle broke protocol frequencies. Then a low, fractured voice, sharp. With panic, command. Recon Alpha under fire. Multiple hostiles, they're everywhere, were pinned. Then silence. Benedetti's team. The same team that had mocked her. The same team that took the open field route she had warned about. Ava jumped to the secondary frequency band. The one they didn't know she was monitoring. Static scrambled comms. The enemy was jamming them. Exactly as she predicted. Major Richter burst into the communications room, face pale. Reports were flooding in. Sector 7, under coordinated assault. Sector 4, overrun vehicle movements flanking the perimeter. Get. Me Recon Alpha. Richter yelled. Only Static answered. Ava stood up. Sir, she said, I can reestablish contact. I've been monitoring alternative frequencies. They haven't jammed. Richter turned. For a moment, he looked like he might say no. Might shout her down, might fall back on protocol. Instead, he simply said, do it. She worked quickly, too quickly for someone supposedly just a technician. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting encrypted frequency modules on her personal rig. Not standard issue, the kind you only saw in classified. NATO units. Within seconds, she was connected. Recon Alpha. This is communications control. Do you read me? The reply came ragged, choked with static and fear. This is Benedetti. We're surrounded, taking fire from multiple angles. These aren't rebels. They're trained. Damn it. Jonas is down. Need immediate extraction. Ava closed her eyes. Every beat of that transmission confirmed it. This was the coordinated offensive she'd been warning about for weeks. She looked at the map, tracing the enemy movement with a fingertip. She knew where they were, how they'd spread out, how they would try to flank. Her own surveillance data had predicted it all, and now it was happening. I have eyes on their formation, she said into her headset. You've got a 200-meter corridor southeast, behind the abandoned farm. Is not in their crossfire yet. Move now. A pause. Then Benedetti again. Who the hell is this? She hesitated for just a moment. Someone who tried to warn you. Camp Vigilant buzzed with chaos. Sirens blared. Troops scrambled. Radios lit up, but in the command tent, clarity was in short supply. Major Richter leaned over tactical. Maps. Brow furrowed. They're hitting multiple sectors at once. Lieutenant Mitchell reported, panic cracking through her voice. Sector 4, Sector 9, even movement near the base perimeter. This isn't random. Richter turned to Ava, who was still guiding Recon Alpha out of the kill zone. How are you tracking this? Ava didn't look up. Because I've been watching every night, every pattern, every frequency. They've been preparing this for weeks. You've been conducting unauthorized surveillance? I've been trying to protect the people this system ignores. For a long second, no one spoke. Then Richter's voice softened. Keep going. She routed frequencies, relayed orders, broke through jamming windows. In minutes, she was coordinating not just Recon Alpha, but 2 additional patrols that had been cut off in the hills. She saw it now, the full scope of the attack. Enemy units converging from multiple sectors, all of them trained, organized, equipped. This wasn't guerrilla warfare. This was military. They had detailed knowledge of NATO patrols, frequencies, even base layout. Ava realized with a sickening lurch. They had insider intel, and still, no one had listened to her until now at 7:42 hours. The enemy breached observation post Charlie. The guards barely had time to send a warning. Before going silent, Ava was already redirecting fire teams, calling in backup, reconfiguring defense protocols. Her encrypted network was now the only one untouched by jamming. Even Mitchell, the intelligence officer who'd once dismissed her outright, stood beside her now, stunned, taking notes, relaying orders Ava gave. This tactical awareness, Mitchell muttered. It's like you're seeing the entire battlefield. I am, Ava said, her voice steady. Because I didn't wait for permission to start watching by 8:10. Ava's network had rescued 2 more squads. Her personal screens lit up with live feeds from hidden drones, thermal signatures, and intercepted comms. She triangulated enemy command posts, identified weak points, and issued movement orders to isolated NATO units from behind her. Richter watched in silence. Then finally, "Where did you learn this?" She paused. Norway Special Recon Division Arctic Surveillance Ops, 18 months classified. Mitchell's head snapped toward her. "You're not just a technician." "I never was." And still there was no time for reflection. Because in the southeast quadrant, the same one she'd flagged over a dozen times in her reports, enemy movement was accelerating. They were heading for the ammunition depot fast, and the base was already stretched thin, no units left. No backup, no time. She looked across the field through her surveillance drone. 8 signatures in tall grass, moving with tactical precision. They were minutes away from crippling NATO's entire supply line. She turned to Richter. "I'll go. You?" He blinked. "You're not infantry." "No," she said. "I'm something else." The grass whispered as she moved through it. She was small, light, silent, ghost-like. Her equipment was specialized. Lightweight, encrypted, heat-dampened gear no one on base even knew she had. Her footsteps left no trace. Her breath was measured ahead. The enemy moved. She could hear them now. Low Czech dialect, hand signals cutting the air. She crept closer, 15 meters, 10-7. Her heart pounded, but her mind was steel. She was back in the Arctic, tracking through snow, surviving off instinct and silence. The first man dropped without a sound. Then the second. They never saw her coming from Camp Vigilant. Richter and Mitchell listened to the live feed, there, eyes wide. "She's taking out a professional infiltration team," Mitchell whispered, alone. "She's doing what we didn't let her do for months." Richter replied, "She's saving us." Ava's voice came through the comms, calm, clipped. "Absolute. Enemy team neutralized explosives, secured no casualties on our side. Ammunition depot safe. Then silence, then. I'm coming home." She walked back through the tall grass with enemy gear strapped to her back. 1 rifle, 2 comms units, a pack of C4 charges that hadn't detonated because she got there first. From a distance, Camp Vigilant looked like it always did. Quiet, calm radios humming, flags fluttering in the breeze. But the people inside were changed. They watched her approach like they were seeing her for the first time. Not the radio tech, not the quiet girl from the corner, but something else entirely. Richter met her at the entrance. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at her, at the enemy gear, at her eyes, at the calm in her stride. "You were right," he finally said. She gave a nod. Too late. It wasn't accusation, it wasn't pride. It was just fact, cold and clean. He sighed. "How much have we missed?" Ava dropped the pack at his feet. "Enough to cost us more lives if we keep pretending." The debriefing lasted hours. Ava sat at the front this time. Maps spread before her. Live comms open data, flowing from every channel she had patched into over the past month. She showed them everything. The patterns, the intercepts, the movement algorithms, the drone scans. Sector 9 wasn't quiet. It was a fallback corridor. Sector 4 wasn't random. It was a feint, and the rebels? They weren't rebels. They were trained soldiers operating under a single, central command. Their tactics suggested Russian influence. Their gear confirmed it. Every assumption Camp Vigilant had made was wrong, because no one had listened until... Now outside, the survivors were returning Patrol Delta, bruised but alive. Recon Alpha, what was left of them, shaken to the core. Men who'd once laughed at her in the mess hall now looked at her differently. One even nodded, not an apology. Not yet. But something close. Mitchell leaned in after the meeting. "You didn't have to do all that alone," Ava's response was soft. You didn't give me a choice. That night, the base went quiet early. No one played music. No one laughed over cards. The silence wasn't grief. Not yet. It was humility. It was realization that they'd missed something. Someone. Ava sat alone in the Cum's tent, her surveillance gear lit in the dark like a cockpit. The base perimeter was stable for now, but movement patterns suggested enemy fallback forces were regrouping. She made notes logged radioactivity sent. Silent updates to a secure channel she built herself. She didn't expect recognition. She expected the next wave. She thought of Norway snowfields, silence, the weight of a rifle in her hands. The feeling of being seen, truly seen, by the instructors who had trained her, not as a woman. Not as a role, but as a weapon of precision and purpose. She missed that clarity at Camp Vigilant. She had been invisible. Now they were watching. But was it too late? She awoke to shouting, not panic, not yet. But tension reports were coming in. Enemy forces regrouping east of the valley. Satellite imagery confirmed reinforcements arriving. Heavier vehicles, mobile artillery, supply trucks. Richter stood in the command tent, eyes flicking between maps. They're not retreating, he said. They're rearming. Ava was already checking frequencies. Enemy comms were encrypted, but familiar. Same structure, same command format. They're preparing phase 2. She said, Richter's jaw clenched. We barely survived phase 1. She outlined the problem in stark terms. Camp Vigilant's current defenses were based on assumptions that were now obsolete. Reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time. Air support was minimal. Communications were fragile. And the enemy knew it. But Ava knew the terrain. She had mapped it inch by inch during her unauthorized recon. If anyone could build a defense that might hold. It was her. Richter hesitated. You're not officially cleared for tactical command. She met his gaze evenly. And yet I'm the only one who knows where they're coming from, how they'll move, and how to stop them. A pause. Then he gave a single nod. Then do it. The plan was unorthodox. No standard formations. No predictable fallback lines. She used misdirection. Moved radio units to lure enemy scans. She deployed decoy signals, created the illusion of reinforced flanks while massing firepower in unexpected corridors. She even repurposed old mining tunnels under the ridge as fallback escape routes. She worked without sleep. She worked like she had something to prove, or maybe like she didn't care about proving anything anymore. Just survival. Her presence was no longer background noise. Now it was strategy. She wasn't support. She was the plan, and as dawn approached, she stood alone once more, overlooking the valley. The tall grass whispered in the breeze beneath it. Silence, but she knew they were out there coming again, and this time, they wouldn't find a blind camp with its guard down. They'd find Ava Anderson waiting. She hadn't moved in over an hour. Ava lay prone at the top of Ridge 12. Motionless in the early light. Through her scope, she watched the tree line at Sector 9, the same tree line intelligence had once called inactive. It wasn't. She could see them now, shadows slipping through brush. Coordinated hand signals, slow and deliberate movements. 8 men, possibly 10. Better equipped this time, more careful. The enemy had learned. So had she. Behind her, Camp Vigilant waited. Tension wound tight across every squad, every station. Every perimeter gunner. Ava had redesigned the entire defense strategy in the span of a night. Richter had given her command authority. Mitchell had handed her direct access to the intelligence database. Even Benedetti now followed her updates like gospel. But the pressure was different now. This wasn't about proving herself. It was about survival. Ava tapped her comm. Visual confirmation. She said calmly, infiltrators entering Sector 9. Formation suggests staggered assault, likely probing our electronic defense perimeter. Mitchell's voice crackled back. Should we engage? Ava paused, studied the terrain, watched how one of the enemies scanned the treetops with practiced precision. No, they're baiting us, trying to trigger an early response. Tell Squad Delta to hold position. Prepare signal jamming in 30 seconds. I'll give the mark. A heartbeat. Then 2. Then she whispered, "Now." Static tore through the enemy comms. Through her scope, Ava saw them react, spinning, startled, hands flying to earpieces, mouths forming silent curses. Their network had gone dark. That was the difference this time. They were blind. Ava wasn't. By mid-morning, 3 attempted infiltrations had been neutralized, not through brute force, through planning, through timing, through Ava. She stood in the center of the operations tent, now, not at the back, not in the corner. She was the briefing, pointing to maps, predicting movement. Correct every time. Benedetti leaned close during one update. His tone was different. Now hushed, humbled. "I thought you were just quiet," he said. "Turns out, you were listening the whole time." Ava didn't look up from the map. "I was waiting," she said softly, "for the noise to stop." The irony wasn't lost on her. She hadn't changed. Not really. The only difference was that now, they were finally listening. But what haunted her wasn't the past. It was what she knew was coming next. This wasn't over. Not even close. That evening, she intercepted a transmission. It was faint, buried under interference. A burst signal routed through civilian channels, masked under traffic patterns and farming drone telemetry. But she found it, decoded it, and what it revealed chilled. They weren't just attacking Camp Vigilant. They were coordinating strikes across multiple NATO forward positions simultaneously. 3 countries, 5 camps. Vigilant was just a testing ground. Ava stared at the screen, heart pounding. The intel was raw but real. They were days, maybe hours, from something much larger, and no one else knew. She printed the files, laid them out in front of Richter and Mitchell at 0200 hours. "This isn't a local conflict," she said. "It's a systemic infiltration, tactical, psychological, electronic." Mitchell's hands trembled as she read the data. Richter swore under his breath. "This isn't just a recon war," Ava added. "It's a probe. They're testing NATO's coordination." Richter looked up at her, the gravity finally sinking in. "Are we the only ones who see it?" "For now," she said, "but that's about to change." She prepared a secure data packet, encrypted, compartmentalized, routed through a satellite link she'd patched together from comms gear, drone relays, and an abandoned surveillance truck. Within minutes, the report was outbound to NATO command. By morning, the silence broke. Vigilant was no longer an outpost. It was the front line. Troops arrived by the hundreds from Denmark, Germany, Canada. Mechanized units rolled into position, artillery crews, tactical support elements, and yet, despite all the reinforcements, it was Ava's face that every commander wanted to speak to. They'd all read the report, the one that came from a support technician no one had ever noticed before, and now they needed her to walk them through it. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't need a promotion. She only asked for one thing: access to every drone, every satellite, every frequency, and they gave it. Without hesitation, for the next 36 hours, Ava barely left her station. She lived in the operations tent, surrounded by screens, data streams, thermal maps, and open comms. Every new piece of intel came through her first. She slept in 20-minute rotations. She ate from RE packets on the floor, but she never slowed, not once, because somewhere out there, the enemy was adapting, and the only way to beat them was to stay one step ahead. Late on the second night, Benedetti entered the tent. He watched her work for a long moment, then sat beside her. "You ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "Just being invisible?" Ava didn't answer right away. She stared at the blinking dots on her screen, each one a threat, a moment away from becoming something worse. "I never wanted attention," she said. "I wanted people to live." A pause. "That's what makes you dangerous," Benedetti replied. "You fight like someone with nothing to prove." She smiled, just a little, then turned back to her screen. Outside, the wind picked up dust, swirled over the hills. Radio towers blinked in the distance, somewhere in the darkness, enemy eyes were watching, calculating that Ava was watching too, and this time, she was ready. Why couldn't she stop shaking? Ava sat alone at the edge of the southern watchtower, boots hanging off the ledge, the camp lights glowing faintly behind her. In the distance, darkness sprawled across the hills, stretching toward the tree lines, where enemy movement had last been spotted. Her hands trembled softly, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the weight of being right. She hadn't slept properly in 3 days. She'd coordinated live battlefield rescue, neutralized an infiltration. Team exposed a continent-wide coordinated strike plan, briefed NATO officers who outranked her by decades. But it wasn't the pressure that got to her. It was the silence between things. The hollow moments after the headset clicks off, after the mission succeeds, after the decisions are made and no one speaks because they're afraid of what almost happened. That's when it hit hardest. She wasn't just carrying data anymore. She was carrying lives. She thought of her brother. He died on a similar mission 2 years ago. Arctic Border Patrol, a recon team that vanished during a whiteout. Command said it was environmental conditions. She never believed that she remembered finding his old radio logs, hidden between journal pages. There were coordinates, intercepts, fragments of a bigger threat that no one had taken seriously. And now it was all happening again. Except, this time, she was still here, still breathing, still able to stop it. A voice broke her thoughts. "You good?" It was Benedetti again. She gave a faint nod, eyes still locked on the horizon. "Didn't expect you to check on me?" He shrugged, resting against the railing. "Didn't expect you to carry the weight of the entire region on your back." For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said something surprising. "We lost Tomas today, Sector 4 tripwire ambush. He was the one who called you the ghost girl." Ava's jaw tightened, not in anger and something deeper. Grief with no place to land. "I tried to warn you," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "We didn't listen." "That's on us." A pause. "We're listening now." By dawn, the wind shifted. Literally and figuratively, drone footage revealed a new formation of enemy forces establishing positions in Sector 12 and Eastern Approach. Ava had flagged repeatedly, but that command believed was impractical for heavy troop movement. But it wasn't just practical. It was brilliant. Thick grass, natural dips in terrain. Masked radar profiles. She saw them clearly, clearer than ever, and they were closing in fast in the operations tent. Ava laid out her findings. "We don't have days," she said. "We have hours, maybe less." Mitchell and Richter exchanged glances. "You sure about this intel?" "I've been sure for months," and they believed her. This time, there was no hesitation. Richter turned to his staff. "Coordinate with Ava. She's leading this one." The words hung in the air. Official, final, and completely unprecedented. Support specialist now in tactical command of Camp Vigilance Defense Operations. She acted immediately, pulled satellite overlays, intercepted comms, recalibrated jamming frequencies, coordinated with mobile artillery, designated fallback zones, refined trap corridors along ridge lines she had memorized like the back of her hand. Every move was tight, sharp, calculated, and for the first time, the entire camp moved with her. No resistance, no side glances, no doubts. But amid the chaos, there was one moment that stopped her cold. As she routed signals through her private command rig, a faint burst transmission blinked on her. Screen encrypted, Norwegian codes outdated. But unmistakable, she froze her brother's signature. Not a message, not a live, but a signal. A buried frequency he had used during his final recon mission. One that had never been logged by command. The same frequency pattern she had, just intercepted, this time being used by the enemy. She leaned back in her chair, pulse racing. They hadn't just mimicked NATO protocols. They had learned from them, inherited them. Hijacked dead soldiers' comms and turned their silence into camouflage, including her brother's. She stared at the blinking dot on her screen. Was that why you vanished?" She whispered. Mitchell approached. "You all right?" Ava didn't answer immediately then. "No, but I will be." She tapped the blinking dot once, then again, then began rewriting the entire engagement protocol. This wasn't just war now. This was personal. That evening, she walked to the same edge of the ridge where she'd taken down the infiltrators days before. She stood in the tall grass again. Same wind, same silence. Only now she wasn't hiding. She wasn't invisible. She was watching them, and they had no idea that the ghost they once ignored was preparing to end everything they had started. What did it mean to be seen too late? At 0457 hours, the first explosion lit the eastern ridge. It was fast, deafening. A fireball swallowed a perimeter drone station in Sector 12. Then came the gunfire, short bursts, measured. Not chaotic. They were here inside the command tent. Ava was already on her feet before the alarms finished sounding. "Sector 12 breach confirmed," she said, voice calm. "All units. Initiate phase Delta fallback. Defensive positions E through H." Mitchell stared at the screens in disbelief. "They moved faster than expected." "No," Ava said, strapping on her headset. "They moved exactly when I expected." She turned to Richter. "It's a full push. Everything they've got." He nodded. "We're ready." But he wasn't looking at the map. He was looking at her outside. Floodlights cut through the darkness as artillery thundered into position. Infantry squads moved with unshakable coordination, not because of rank, but because they trusted her. Ava's voice guided every angle, every sector, every call, and she was everywhere. At 0512, the second wave hit the southern ridge. Sector 7 lit up in fire and smoke, but Ava had already redirected a secondary unit, hidden in the ruins of an old CUM station, lying in wait. She watched from her screen as the enemy walked right into the crossfire. 2 squads gone in under 4 minutes. Still, it wasn't enough. They kept coming, more organized than before. Aggressive. But she saw their rhythm, their cracks, their limits, and she pushed harder. Squad Delta. Shift left by 20 meters. You're walking into indirect fire. Adjust now. Patrol Echo. Hold position. Wait for the second burst of enemy movement. Then flank low through the drainage trench. Each order was razor sharp, not shouted, spoken precise. Her voice became the spine of the entire defense. At 0546, Benedetti called in. "We're cut off near Grid 4, C5 left, ammo's running dry." "I see you," Ava replied instantly. "Enemy reinforcement coming from the east vehicles. You have a 90-second window to move west before the convoy crests the hill. I'll give you cover." "How the hell do you see all this?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she clicked over to another channel, Sector H drones. "Engage distraction protocol. Fire southward. Center ridge. Full visual flash. No explosives." Seconds later, the hillside lit up in flame and strobing light, just enough to draw enemy eyes away from Benedetti's route. Ava came back on the line. "Now move." They ran, crawled, dragged one another, and made it alive. Because she was watching, but it wasn't over. At 0600, a new threat appeared. A convoy armored transports with reinforced turrets slipping through a canyon Ava had marked as impassable days before. She cursed under her breath. They'd adjusted their terrain mapping, just like she had Mitchell paled. "We don't have anti-vehicle in range." Ava's eyes narrowed. "No, but we have alternatives." She rerouted 2 drone units, hijacked their remote protocols, and patched them through her own encrypted channel, a command override most techs didn't even know existed. Then she smiled. "You want a hard target? I'll show you a hard target." On the screen, 2 small glints emerged from the clouds. Drone a 14 and a 15. Not for surveillance this time. This time, for strike. The explosion shook the earth beneath the base. The canyon filled with smoke vehicle. Parts rained from the sky like ash. Mitchell looked at her, stunned. "Did you just command your own airstrike? Ava didn't answer. She just adjusted her headset and moved on. By 0630, enemy forces began to fracture. Not retreating, not yet, but slowing, confused. Because what they expected, what their intelligence had told them, was a quiet base with fractured leadership. Misaligned command, outdated surveillance. Instead, they found something else. They found Ava. In the northern watchtower, Richter stood with binoculars, scanning the horizon. He turned to the radio. All units, be advised, enemy fallback. Signs confirmed, intercept patterns are green. You know the voice to follow. His voice softened. Command authority remains with Anderson. She heard it, but didn't pause, because in that moment, a final transmission came through. Weak, encrypted, familiar her. Brother's frequency again, but this time, not interference. This time, it was an intentional signal, one that wasn't coming from the enemy, but from a secure channel buried deep in a NATO ghost system, one shut down 2 years ago. Her blood went cold. She ran the decryption sequence, and as it unlocked, her eyes widened. What if he hadn't died? Ava stared at the decrypted transmission. Her screen the only light in the now silent comms tent. It wasn't just a ghost signal. It was a breadcrumb, coordinates, encrypted route logs, tactical entries written in a shortened. Only 2 people knew her brothers. She read the file again. It was him, not alive, but not forgotten, not erased. Buried by someone who wanted him and his mission to disappear. She pressed play. A single audio clip crackled through. If this message is found, then I failed. Or someone made sure I couldn't speak either way. The threat's real. They're inside NATO protocols, surveillance access, comms architecture. You won't stop it through the chain of command. You'll have to go around it quietly, like we trained. Then silence. She sat frozen. She'd always believed. He died in the storm. Now she knew better. He died trying to stop the very thing she was fighting, and now it was her turn to finish what he started. She walked out of the tent as the eastern sky glowed orange with fire from distant artillery. Her face gave nothing away, but inside, she burned, not with rage, with resolve. The next hours unfolded. Like a storm, Ava no longer issued suggestions. She gave orders, and they were followed. Patrol Bravo repositioned to the ridge flanks within 5 minutes. Drone recon was expanded using a signal boost. She patched through salvaged hardware. She called for a grid lockdown in Sector 6, based on seismic vibration data. She pulled from engineering archives no one had touched in weeks. When Richter approached with questions, she answered them before he finished asking. This battle isn't just out there, she told him. It's inside our systems. They've been listening, watching since the start. His eyes darkened. Then how do we close the doors? We don't, she said. We shut down the whole building. She launched Operation Collapse at 0913 hours. Her own plan, unauthorized, unconventional, but approved unanimously by a command team that had finally learned what she really was. The objective wasn't to win by brute force. It was to collapse the enemy's own intelligence web from within. She began by feeding them false data, fake patrol routes, decoy transmissions, redacted casualty reports. Then she triggered dormant protocols, old NATO misdirection tactics. Decommissioned after the Cold War, within 30 minutes, the enemy's battle rhythm broke. They overcommitted on a fake artillery push, moved too soon on a false reinforcement signal, deployed reserves toward a valley Ava had already cleared, and then she shut off their eyes. Her final move was a digital blackout. Using algorithms her brother had written, she initiated a cascading comm disruption overriding enemy relay towers, severing their battlefield coordination one node at a time. Their network went dark, blinds scattered and exposed. The battlefield shifted. Enemy squads moved without cover fire. Officers gave orders to units that no longer existed. Coordination turned to confusion. Confusion turned to retreat, and the retreat turned into a rout. Mitchell leaned over Ava's shoulder, stunned. They're falling apart. Your operation is dismantling their entire field structure. No, Ava said quietly. They did that to themselves, I just showed them the mirror. By 10:20, Camp Vigilant was no longer under attack. It was chasing ghosts. Enemy vehicles, abandoned comms, silent. Bodies scattered across the ridges, and none of them were hers. Not this time, and yet, even in the glow of success, Ava felt no victory, only a void the kind her brother had left behind. She walked back to her station, pulled up the encrypted files again, read every note, every coordinate, every last line he'd written in code. Then, for the first time since the war began, she cried not loud, not long. Just enough to feel it, enough to let it go. She whispered to the silence. I saw it too. I heard what no one else wanted to believe. And I did what you couldn't finish. Her voice broke, but I wish I didn't have to do it without you. She didn't hear applause. There was no ceremony, no handshake, no formal citation pinned to her chest. But when Ava walked through the camp that morning, boots muddy, uniform rumpled, headset still on, soldiers stepped aside. Not out of protocol, out of respect. They nodded. Some looked down in shame. But most simply met her eyes with something they hadn't before. Recognition. She returned to her station, recalibrated the long-range relay, rebooted the thermal sensors, checked the power lines to the far perimeter tower, the one no one but her had thought to maintain, not because she had to, but because that's what she did, even now. The battlefield was quiet, for the first time in weeks. No warning alarms, no incoming transmissions, just the distant hum of generators and the soft rustle of wind moving through the tents, but she knew it wouldn't last. It never did. She scanned the skies, checked frequencies, and waited not for orders, not for recognition, but for the next silence that needed to be broken. Later that day, Major Richter found her sitting by the comms mast, wrench in hand, fixing a loosened junction. You saved this place, he said. She didn't look up. I tried to save it months ago. He nodded, guilt tightening his jaw. We didn't listen. No, she said quietly. You listened when it was too late, but you did listen. A pause then. She added, that's something. He sat beside her, knees creaking. What are you going to do after this? She smiled faintly. Go home maybe, or maybe not. He waited. She looked up at the mast, wires twisting against the early evening sky. People think war is about noise, she said, about bullets and shouts and sirens. But most of it happens in the silence, in the rooms where no one hears you, at the tables where they don't let you speak. She turned to him. But silence can be a weapon too. And sometimes the quietest person is the one who saves everyone. That night, she stood alone on the southern ridge, the same one where she'd first seen them moving through the grass, the same place where she rose, unseen, and rewrote everything below her. Camp Vigilant pulsed with new energy. Troops rebuilding sandbags, engineers laying comms cable, medics laughing in the distance. A base that had nearly died in its own arrogance, now thriving because one woman refused to stay invisible. She took a breath, closed her eyes, and remembered his voice. Her brother's. You'll have to go around the system, quietly, like we trained. She opened her eyes still and clear, then turned and walked back toward the lights. No medals awaited her, no headlines. But the base was alive. The people were alive, and the storm had passed, not because of loud heroes, but because of the ghosts they nearly ignored. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.